Hello and welcome to Episode 2, Intelligence Agencies and the Shift in World Order. To take a deep dive into this topic, we have today with us the subject matter expert, Dr. Ecaterina Matoi. Hi, Katrina. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Omkar. Thank you for having me.
Likewise, thank you very much for joining us and giving us your precious time. I know the experts around the world have been a lot busier these days, especially due to the current climate of the world politics. As we'll be taking a deep dive into this topic, so can you please provide us a brief outlook on your journey as a researcher and an expert in this sector?
Actually, I have started around 20 years ago. I have a BA in foreign languages, English and Arabic section, an MA in political sciences, security and diplomacy specialization as well, and two PhDs, one of them in intelligence and national security and another one in Near and Middle Eastern studies. This is, of course, and also several certificates. I don't want to name all of them. We don't have time. Regarding my professional experience, I used to work for a long period of time for companies from Romania in relation with companies and state institutions from the Middle East. The companies were producers of the military equipment, so it was a tough challenge for me. I mean, as well as very interesting. This is why I pursued also an MA in marketing, because I felt at that point that it is necessary to understand the relation of marketing, especially when it's about military stuff. Coming closely, I've been actually a member of the Faculty of Security and Defense for 8 years at the National Defense University in Bucharest, at the communication section, strategic, public and intercultural communication department, influencing communication section. I stopped last year to work for the National Defense Ministry as well, because I thought as a next step for me, for my career. And since then, I've started to act and to provide services as a political consultant in the Middle East as well as a region, especially as well as a North Africa region. And I'm still teaching. I'm an associated lecturer at several universities from Romania and abroad, and program director of the Middle East Economic and Political Institute from Bucharest. I hope I've been short, please.
Yes. Yes, definitely. I think this is one of the extensive expert, the portfolio I've ever heard, 2 PhDs and, wide variety and a range of expertise. I think generally in the security studies, we always observe that, no matter how much ever things you do, it's always less. But I think with experts like you, and it's a broad range of expertise that we can always discuss and have you on board. So yeah, I think you really are an inspiration, especially for our generation who have been, on the way to the PhD or around on the way, to become a research scholar. So yes, thank you very much again.
Thank you for my words, please.
To start with the questions, I'd like to, start with the basic thing. So why intelligence gathering is important and how these agencies play a key role in shaping the future of a particular nation, or I would say, general a country as well.
This question actually is not, apparently it's easy to answer, and still it's not that easy to answer. Why? Because gathering intelligence actually is not a new or contemporary practice, it's a contemporary practice, but it's as old as our world it is. The only thing that has changed is the name of the formal entity that is receiving the intelligence, as well as the goals and the means used. And also, I believe that to answer to your question may require a separate conference or a podcast for itself, probably an annual one, since the intelligence environment is a dynamic one. And of course, goals and means have evolved in time. However, if I will try to stick on the schedule and to be short, but still I think that this question requires a more developed answer. And just I want to remind you of Sun Tzu. I'm pretty sure that you know about Sun Tzu, you've heard about Sun Tzu and his book, The Art of War. And I quote, "He who knows the enemy and himself will never in 100 battles be at risk," right? And that reflects the reason the truth of modern intelligence agencies. Therefore, please allow me to complement this statement with a further opinion. Especially during peacetime, one should know at state level and facilitate the information of population who the real enemies may be and how different interests can affect states or different segments of their population. And although an intelligence agency should not fully disclose its intents and purposes, the CIA mentioned on its website, and I quote, "We are the nation's first line of defense. We accomplish what others cannot accomplish and go where others cannot go. We give the United States leaders the intelligence they need to keep our country safe." The intelligence they need to keep our country safe. This is very important when you think about while thinking about this, the intelligence agencies. Also, they say that their work is vital to the United States national security, and therefore they are collecting and analyzing foreign intelligence and conduct covert action with the purpose that US policymakers, including the President of the United States, make policy decisions informed by the information they are providing. Although this stance is probably very much simplified, it certainly illustrates what any person should expect from intelligence agency in the classical sense. But what is it, and that any person does not expect and an intelligence agency delivers. Without inviting to a confrontational approach, I would like to emphasize that on one hand, international collaboration is very important in order to achieve common goals, like world peace and tackling climate change, it's trendy these days, in a meaningful way. But on the other hand, certain region, countries, or even groups may have different interests. And in order to pursue them, I would invite you to follow both the historical evolution of these interests, means of action, and future perspectives from different angles of observation. As a conclusion for this answer, I would like to underline the fact that intelligence gathering is both practice and constantly evolving science. While agencies might represent the first line, cases like Cambridge Analytica demonstrate that intelligence gathering, presumably a state affair, might be performed in a non-conventional approach by various types of actors and various purposes. Therefore, we have to pay attention more to companies, like private entities such Cambridge Analytica, if they are private, of course, and not quite to the state intelligence agencies. This is what I think, because even though being intelligence agencies, they should, and we know only those public information they offer. And they should not shouldn't know what they are doing actually, because that's the key for an intelligence agency. Still, they have a kind of formal. They have a certain delimited space where they are acting, how they are acting. While these private companies, these private entities such Cambridge Analytica, and this is just an example, are actually they are deserving our attention and also concerns, Omkar.
Yeah. Yes, I think what you have mentioned, especially about the international cooperation, I see generally the communication platforms these days has bridged a lot of gap, but it has also created some level of, threat as well from a national security perspective, the way people see, the way people say, and the way people consume the content. So with historical footprint, how the digital world and open source tools have impacted the modern day intelligence agency, especially with respect to the information warfare?
This is quite, it's coming after, it's an important question, is completing the previous one. This This is what I think, because I consider while we are already emerged in what one would call the virtual space, the real implications of this transformation I have mentioned, should one consider it as being a transformation, require further analysis and adaptation in order to ensure that societies truly benefit from it. With this in mind, I would like to make a clear distinction between various facets of digitalization. While in the relation between state and citizens, there are many steps that need to be taken in order to experience the real benefits, one needs to acknowledge that more or less legitimate interests emerged with the rise of internet and computers, right?
Yes.
It is obviously therefore difficult to enact proper legislation for an emerging phenomenon, but we can ask ourselves, how did every citizens of the world benefited from digitalization? While some were not immersed in this environment and others enriched themselves, the Z generation, for example, grew with the internet as previous generations grew with the TV. The major difference is that influencers and propagandists have now much more access to worldwide population and can focus their campaigns in an environment that is still poorly regulated. Should the Westphalian state still claim to guarantee the rights of their citizens, their representatives should massively step up the efforts to ensure not only proper education, but also real online security, cybersecurity. Taking the case of Europe, for example, neither the EU nor any particular state can do this relatively fast, since the European Union is lagging behind in operating systems, search engine technology, regulated cloud computing platforms, satellite networks to ensure safe data transmission, as I'm pretty sure that they are much more aware than me. If this was to be seriously approached, real results may be achieved in 1 decade at best from now on. Looking beyond this foundation that is absolutely necessary when discussing about digital intelligence capabilities, we also need to scrutinize the way in which data is collected and processed, as the distinction between what was traditionally called democratic society and communist society becomes subject of debate from the perspective of surveillance, both online and offline. We can argue about the role of intelligence agencies in an environment that is increasingly monitored by various actors with different levels of social responsibility. If the intelligence agencies are supported politically and will manage to ensure the necessary information, counter-information, needs of states and societies, the societies may become more democratic in the online environment. Finally, on this topic, the information warfare may be also a matter of resources. I'm not going to develop more on information warfare because it's not, many people are associating information warfare just with information, but it's not only related to information. It's about psyops in operation. It's about also cyber and so on and so forth. Besides previously mentioned infrastructure imperatives, I consider that the human resource and education in the field of intelligence are key aspects that require long-term attention.
That's a very interesting point you mentioned about the infrastructure and all. I think these all the factors and elements are something that are changing the dynamics in the international affairs. And I think with the current climate of the Ukraine, what has been happening in Ukraine, and especially the massive support of EU towards the Ukraine, can you provide a brief outlook on how security agencies should prepare to counter future threats similar to what the European Union is facing at the moment?
Usually, I'm pretty sure that you observe that I don't speak about Ukraine crisis or conflict. Yeah. Because it's something that I have never seen and I've never, how shall I say, found or read about in my studies. And I'm studying and reading, since I know myself. Perhaps since I was 5 years old, Yeah. And it's they're very difficult to speak about what's happening over there still. Moving from intelligence agencies to security agencies in this discussion requires much attention, because I'd like to stress that modern security concepts are complex, and this is not a simple statement. We first, for example, had COVID crisis in which we all saw on TV Russian troops assisting countries like Italy, at least at the beginning of the pandemic. and then a conflict at the borders of the European Union. The pandemic itself was a security challenge, the conflict in Ukraine, another one, and the combination of the two, a completely different and more serious security threat.
Yeah.
The political decision of the European Union to provide support to Ukraine in the way that it did and still doing will probably be assessed by academics better in the next years. The events are still ongoing. It's very difficult to assess something which is ongoing.
Yes. Yeah, I understand from this
And
perspective. It's still
yeah,
a very fresh subject, and but I was just curious. That's the reason I didn't put up a lot of things, in and around Ukraine. But I was just curious about this whole topic. But I understand.
yes,
Yeah.
if I may, in any conflicts, taking sides or abstaining from taking sides has political risks and consequences on Kharkiv.
Yes.
Should the EU prevail along its main allies, the UK and the US, in the goals it aimed, Europe will probably benefit from this stance. How much and in which manner it is difficult to predict, like I said previously. However, even in this positive scenario, we need to recognize two important aspects. Any war taking place from now on will accelerate climate change, since logistics will still be based on fossil fuels, and munition pollutes the environment. And secondly, Europe risks to face a long-term conflict area near its borders. It's please, I would like to remind you, my second PhD topic was regarding actually I researched the reconstruction of the Iraqi army. It's very easy to conquer a country, but it's very difficult to maintain the control of that country. Let's think that Ukraine is going to, supported by the United States and its allies, Europe, and so on and so forth, we're going to prevail and they're going to defeat Russia. Let's say that Vladimir Putin are going to disappear from the political scene and is going to be judged by international court. And it's, I don't know, all of those that are responsible for what's happening over there. How we are going to control Russia? Of course, there are going to be companies that are going to control the resources, important and key resources of Russia. Still, how we are going to control people like our Russians? If you are not able to control a few bunch of organizations in Iraq or Syria or Yemen. Let's go further. This latter security threat will have both economic and social consequences. In an environment with increased security threats, the most effective defense would be structural strengthening of the European Union. The role of intelligence agencies, because we are talking about them, can help improve security and approaches at micro level, but ultimately the entire body will be able to handle a flu when it is itself strong. And I hope it's enough for this question, Omkar, because otherwise I'm going to speak all day.
Yes. No, I think we should have a different session on this topic whenever the issue is matured well enough. So, a little bit moving away from this topic, because I have been very curious about the world order, especially to just touch up on this topic again, but in a slight manner, not exactly in a way the previous question was. So do you think the Russian-Ukraine conflict might trigger some extremist movement in the Central Asian region? And if so, how the European security agencies will potentially react to such situations?
Actually, it's a very good question. Why? Because I was thinking these days, I'm mapping the extremist organization. I mean, these terms, it sounds to me like we used to talk about the Islamist organization after the Cold War. Then we were talking about, started to talk about terrorists with the 9/11. Now we're talking about extremists and far rights. It's only about the term that you are using, and it has to be trendy. Still, let's see. For me, and I was making an analogy between extremist movements with Uber. When you need an Uber, is there.
Yes.
From my hybrid warfare perspective, anyway, let's answer in a serious way. The extremist movements appear in weak security environments, but may also be employed by non-legitimate interests to achieve goals in areas where they want to provoke chaos. Taking into consideration, for example, that the Taliban movement was deemed as extremist or non-extremist through the Cold War, and afterwards, based on a short-term interest, calling an organization extremist or not has a short-term significance, but arming organizations and promoting violence on any scale makes a difference in global security landscapes nowadays.
Exactly.
Taking into consideration that China is developing this region for its own economic interests, the rest of the world may see a benefit from remote conflicts in China's proximities areas. However, I do not consider the conflict from Ukraine has a real potential to trigger extremist movements, because the conflict from Ukraine is just a stop, in a way. Somebody is making his way from, let's say, from Paris to, I don't know, to Basel. And between Basel and Paris, there is a station, and the station is Ukraine. You have to imagine like that. And what's the role of extremist organization? This extremist organization role is depending on the needs, on the challenge appear on the road. You have to imagine like that. Yes. So, like I said, I do not consider that this conflict has a real potential to trigger. Peace and arming or disarming clandestine groups should be urgently negotiated anyway with superpowers like the United States, Russia, Federation, China, and enforced worldwide in an effective manner. Because these days at the conference I've mentioned to you, I've participated as a speaker and as well as I deliver a presentation as well. I spoke actually about the so-called Islamic State and the significance of this type of organization, and I'm bring it into discussion because I mentioned that their significance, this type of organization significance, is to avoid responsibility at the international level by those state actors that are behind this type of organization. Yes. So we have to think in this way, because otherwise, not only perhaps today is about Russia or Ukraine, and yesterday it was about Iraq and other countries. Tomorrow, perhaps it is about China as well as today. The other day, perhaps it has to be India, because it's an emerging power and an extremely important power in the region. And not only the region has the potential to become a superpower. I mean, global power. India. This is what I think, of course.
Yes, as we are hovering around the Central Asian region, so and we are as we are approaching the main topic, the world order. So I think it's starting from over here. So do you think, can US withdrawal from Afghanistan be considered an intelligence failure? And do you believe it has affected the world order, given the fact that one of the world powers failed to eradicate terrorism in Afghanistan?
The question reflects actually the narratives from the public space on God, what we had to accept as being what's happening actually in Afghanistan. It was delivered to us starting with 2 years ago, I think, and especially when the US troops were withdrawn last year, right? Yes. Still, even though the withdrawal of the US from Afghanistan may be represented as an intelligence failure, but also we can see it as a win for the industrial military complex. Okay.
Yeah.
It's a big win.
All right. Yeah.
Let's have a look just at the huge amount of money that we're spent, right?
Yeah.
Please.
No, definitely. I think from that point of view, definitely it's bubbling topic, and with respect to aligning with this topic itself, because one of the big powers, India, being one of the emerging economies in Asia, I would say, which also had key economic ties with Afghanistan, and considering the latest movements that have been happening in between India and US, they have signed multiple agreements, not only in defense but in as well as in the space industry as well. So do you think will India become one of the important nations to cement the future world order aligned with the West? Because historically things have been a little bit reversed. India has been prominent defense partner with Russia, but now the things have been rapidly changing, especially from the past decade. So, any thoughts on that?
Um, yes, actually, I was following also what's happening at Security Council with those votes on different resolutions. And also, I was surprised, but not very much, by the stance of India, because it's part of BRICS, right? And also, it is a nuclear power. While the world order may be a term characteristic to the 20th century, I would like to remind you that actually it was very much vehiculated during the last century. Still, the way the planet will look in the 100 years from now on may be characterized at the best by world orders or other terms also. The assumption that the West will have the same structure as today and that it will continue to dominate as it did in the 19th century is also an assumption that requires research. It is our perspective that the West dominated 20th century as well, but in fact, the United States dominated a large part of the globe and the Soviet Union occupied a major land area. India aims to become again a cultural power as it did in the past, not align itself with the West. Again,
All
it
right.
certainly plays a role in the balance of power between the West and China or Russia, but ultimately its aim is to remain neutral and develop independently on the world stage. And I think this would be the best choice that India has might take during these moments. It's very difficult because you may align with the West, but let's have a look at the Indians, the Indian people. People generally tend not to forget the past. And still, though somehow the West seems to be appealing, the values and the past and the pain from the past, the scars of the past are not forgotten or caught by
Yeah,
the Indian people.
yeah, I think coming from that country, I definitely observe this thing, and that's the reason I curiously asked this question to the experts like you. Yeah, moving forward, how do you see the unfolding of future world order, and do you think uh, will the world face any new political instability after Russia-Ukraine conflict?
The future world order is a term that might not apply for our future, Onkar. Why we look at this classical conflict from Ukraine, conventional if you want, or apparently conventional, because I do myself, I believe it's actually more an intelligence conflict based on intelligence rather than on conventional means. Keeping in mind all those I'm repeating myself, those means that are involved and used by different parties that
Yes.
are taking part from this conflict. It is certainly more real for Europeans than the wars. The conflict from Ukraine is more real for Europeans than the wars from Yemen, Syria, or Iraq. But at the same time, they are similar. I can only say that the world order will be shaped by realistic, brave, moral, and ethic individuals and societies, as it has always been the case. In the context of both neoliberal and more social approaches, themselves not perfect, the conflict from Ukraine is both a historical reminder of how things can go really wrong and an alarm signal that structural premises of societies must be strengthened.
Yes. I think the
So,
last sentence that you mentioned about, kind of key takeaways, it's very important what we learn out of it. That's yeah. The last part that you mentioned just now about the Ukraine conflict, like the key learning takeaways, that it's an alarming situation that things can go wrong. So can you just a little bit, one or two sentence mention about, like what key takeaways, something that, as an organization, as an expert, we should take away from this conflict?
I'm skeptical regarding the outcome, Omkar.
Yeah.
I want, as a citizen of the world, as a mother, as a wife, as a normal human being, and also as a researcher and a lecturer, I believe and I hope in peace. I accept many things. I accept the war on resources. I mean, the wars, it means like, but that war which is behind this, behind open, I mean, which actually is dealt through alliances, secret agreements, and so on and so forth.
Yes.
I don't like the war itself as we can see it, even though there are only not so many people that are dying in Ukraine as it was to be in other wars. Every single person that is dying, every single human being, child or man or woman that is dying in Ukraine is for Ecaterina Matoi I'm dying with that person. Myself, a little bit of myself is dying. It's a defeat of the humanity. It's a defeat of us as researcher, of those part that we are, that part of society which is it must to protect the humanity.
Yes.
We know what's happening, and still we cannot do anything. Also, I'm not scared. I'm concerned with the outcome, because it is going to trigger not only, it's going to trigger instability in Europe. Somehow the European Union, Europe in itself, the world continent, is going to pay a higher price than we can ever imagine.
Yes.
This is what I'm concerned. It's not only Europe. I'm not talking about food crisis. I mean, though it's a little bit too early, because the war started 2 months ago, 2 months, and so on. I don't know, not too much. Still, the effects, we cannot feel still the effects of this war, this conflict. When I'm thinking about the food, yeah, because we are going to feel it perhaps at the end of the year, and more accentuated during the next year. When it's about instability, it's about the borders. You know, Ukraine is not part of the European Union. Still, there are so many people that are traveling through Europe during this moment. Not all of them have good intentions. We don't know how many of them are working for whom. What are their intentions? It's about also the far right extremists. I'm talking about extremists. The real extremists. Have a look not only at Azov. There are more than that. We are going to. It's not. Let's go back to the extremist organization you have mentioned. You asked, and you are concerned with your question. You said, okay, are going to be more extremist organization in Central Asia. I'm going also to remind you that what is an extremist organization is a bunch of people that are trained and paid. Actually, they are not they are not concentrated around an ideological aim, but rather based on money. They are paid, and this is very important. They don't care what is their name. They don't care if their name is Daesh. They don't care if their name is Azov. They don't care if their name is Wagner or the other private military companies, such as, I don't know, there are so many. No, they care only about money. And if they receive an order, they are going to fulfill it. And that's it. And the most important is what's their next mission. It might be any country from Europe. It might be, I don't know, like you said, India, China, interests, or right? See, this is it's about the insecurity that is going to be felt perhaps even more under different forms in the near future. I mean, perhaps in next 6 to maximum 1 month. Let's go a little bit further to develop a little bit further the refugees from Ukraine. Now, okay, we have to. It's normal to help. It's a part of our nature as human beings, right? We are helping them. We provide them with food, with services, but at a certain point, even these societies, these European and educated societies, let's say it like that, they are going to be fed up. There is going to be a limit, and how we are going to react in 6 months, 1 month. Let's give you an example. These days in Romania, for example, I've seen many Ukrainian cars, very expensive cars, that were running actually without respecting the speed limits, and not only outside the towns, but also inside the cities. And their behavior is such a kind of, I can't do anything because yes, I'm a refugee and I can do that. No, it's not like that.
Yeah.
At a certain point, the societies are going to react somehow. The pressure. There are going to be a point when the reaction will start to appear and under different forms. And let's going further. I'm talking about the instability. I'm talking about this paid, let's say, foreign fighters. They're not quite foreign fighters. They are also from different countries, from European countries. They are from other countries. And, it's like, I remember, I'd like to remind you about the Al-Qaeda. The Mujahideen they fought against Soviets in Afghanistan. They were Mujahideen, they are freedom, right? Freedom fighters. And then they transformed themselves into what? Into terrorists, right?
Yes.
Where they were sent back to their homes. Let's have a look at Tunisia, for example. Tunisia these days, they have identified more than 100 terrorist cells in Tunisia. This is very much security, is a very important security threat to a state, which is also a poor state such as Tunisia is, which is next to Libya, not to mention that Algeria is nearby and also are thinking about gas and so on and so forth. It's not that easy to say, okay, it's going to be peace in Ukraine, everything will come back to normal. No, that normality will never come. Perhaps in more, I don't know, perhaps in 50 years from now on.
Yes.
If, please.
Yeah, so I was just saying that what you mentioned about the stability won't come possibly for 50 years. I very much align with that point because looking at the past other countries who have gone through that destabilization, they still haven't, recovered from that conflict zone, especially the recent example, Afghanistan, even the current conflict which is going on in the Yemen, Libya. So yes, I very much align with that point.
It will take time to come back to normal, and the people are going to change. Alliances are going to change. I don't know what's going to happen with the European Union as an entity. I used to be very proud of European Union. I used to be very proud as a European Union citizen. I was very much proud, and I have trusted the leadership of the European Union. But step by step, having a look of what's happening and the way they are dealing with the Ukrainian conflict, actually, I'm very much disappointed. And now I know that in the end, what prevails, it's not the interests of the citizens, but the interests of the elites, Onkar.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. And like, as we are approaching the conclusion part, so as an expert in the international affairs, of what message would you like to give to future generation stepping into this field of intelligence and security studies?
I'm always saying that no matter what kind of job you are doing, do your best. Do your best means to be informed, to speak the main languages that in the field that are required in the field you are specialized, and to be on the time, to be all the time updated what's happening around you. And of course, when it's about giving an advice in international relations, now it's very difficult to summarize the experience in a short advice, my experience in a short advice, and even more difficult to presume that this will be beneficial for future developments because things are changing, Omkar. Yes. I only trust that the new generations of intelligence and security officers will have the strength to thoroughly assess history and make a strong contribution to the development to the societies they serve. They will know when they will have achieved it. And this is as part, we should differentiate between the intelligence and security officers and the researchers in security studies or intelligence studies, because those people that are going to work in the intelligence agencies, they are very clear, orders to follow, and they also have to respect ethics. When it's about researchers, that are not part of these intelligence agencies, they should not forget about objectivity and doing their part to achieve the greater good for the humankind.
Yes, definitely. I think this is a very good message that you mentioned about the researchers, especially because I have never seen people talking more about from a researcher's point of view. Mainly, people we see from talking from an operational perspective in the intelligence segment.
So, how shall I put it? Intelligence is one thing, security is another thing. Both of them are working as domains, as fields, are directed normally to protect an entity, a state.
Yes.
Once again, I'm scared that the world order you have mentioned and you asked me about previously is going to face a new type of challenge. It's about the disappearance of several states and the appearance of a new state. And the only states that are going to survive are those states that are state nation, such as India, Egypt, China.
Yes.
You see?
Yes. Yeah.
And they have very much potential to resist due to their connection between, it's very much for the person, for the people, for the citizen to be inner motivated. Money are not enough from a certain point, Omkar, for most of us. They're important, but not more important than our values and principles. And I'm pretty sure that those people are going to, exactly like I said in the previous question, they are going to change the world. Those people that are going to keep and to protect and to maintain their principles and values.
Yes, definitely. I think thank you very much for this session. I think we have taken a lot more time of you, and firstly, very, very thankful to you to provide such a perspective on this critical topic, because this topic is very broad, and I think the kind of series of few minor questions that have popped up, especially on the infrastructure of the intelligence and all, we can definitely have other sessions in the near future whenever you will be available. So yeah, once again, thank you very much, Ecaterina, for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you, Omkar, for having me. And I wish you very much good luck in your future endeavors.
Thank you.